You're really gonna wear that?
Victoria Hayes stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of her Denver penthouse, adjusting the wrinkled thrift store blouse that hung awkwardly on her frame. The woman looking back at her bore no resemblance to the CEO who'd graced the cover of Forbes 3 months ago. "Perfect," she murmured, pulling her blonde hair into a messy ponytail and adding a touch of foundation to make her skin look tired. She'd practiced this transformation dozens of times over the past year. Victoria Hayes, billionaire tech mogul, disappeared. In her place stood Victoria Miller, unemployed graphic designer struggling to make ends meet. The irony wasn't lost on her that she owned the building where tonight's date would take place, but Marcus wouldn't know that. According to her carefully crafted online dating profile, she was just another broke 30-something, hoping to find love in an expensive city. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya, her only real friend, and the one person who knew about her deception. "How many dates is this now?" 6, 7. "Maybe it's time to try honesty for once." Victoria typed back quickly. "This is different. Marcus seems genuine. We've been talking for weeks. That's what you said about David and Jonathan." And Victoria turned off her phone. Maya meant well, but she didn't understand. When you're worth $350 million and every man you meet sees dollar signs instead of a person, desperate measures become necessary measures. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like descending into another life. Victoria's real car, a silver Lexus, sat in its reserved spot. Next to it, her deception mobile, a 15-year-old Honda Civic she'd bought for cash from a used car lot, waited with its dented bumper and fading paint. As she drove through downtown Denver's bustling Friday evening traffic, Victoria rehearsed her backstory. Laid off 6 months ago from a small design firm, living with roommates in Capitol Hill, picking up freelance projects when she could find them. The lies rolled off her tongue with practiced ease now. The grind was exactly the kind of place unemployed Victoria would suggest a coffee shop with mismatched furniture and local art covering the walls. Victoria arrived 10 minutes early, ordering a small regular coffee black, no expensive additions that might blow her cover. Marcus walked in at exactly 7 o'clock, scanning the room with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about money. Tall designer casual clothes, perfect teeth that screamed expensive orthodontia. He spotted her immediately, his smile bright as he approached. "Victoria, you look even more beautiful than your photos." "Thank you," Victoria said, standing to shake his hand. She'd learned to gauge men's reactions in the first 30 seconds. Marcus's smile remained steady. No flicker of disappointment at her thrift store appearance. "So tell me about yourself," Marcus said, after ordering an elaborate coffee drink that cost more than Victoria's fictional daily food budget. "What's it been like job hunting in this market?" Victoria launched into her rehearsed story about layoffs and economic uncertainty, watching Marcus's face for signs of judgment or pity. He nodded sympathetically, asking the right questions, seeming genuinely interested in her fictional struggles. 30 minutes in, Victoria was almost convinced she'd found someone different. Marcus listened when she talked, laughed at her jokes, didn't try to impress her with stories about his expensive lifestyle. When she mentioned stress about rent money, he looked concerned rather than turned off. Then his phone rang. "Sorry, I should take this," Marcus said, glancing at the screen. "Business call." Victoria nodded, sipping her coffee while Marcus stepped away. She couldn't help but overhear his side of the conversation. "Yeah, I'm on that coffee date I mentioned. The broke one. No, she's actually pretty hot, might be worth a few dates if she's grateful enough." "What? No, of course, I'm not serious about this one. You know I don't date down. This is just for fun until Sarah gets back from Europe." Victoria felt her stomach drop. She'd heard these conversations before in restaurant bathrooms and outside fancy clubs. Rich men bragging about their charity cases, their temporary entertainment, their slumming expeditions into the real world. Marcus returned to the table with an apologetic smile, completely unaware that Victoria had heard every word. Sorry about that. Where were we? Oh, right, you were telling me about your job search. Victoria forced herself to smile. Actually, I should probably get going. Early morning tomorrow. Really? But we just got started. Marcus reached across the table, touching her hand. Look, I know things are tight for you financially. Why don't I take you to dinner this weekend, somewhere nice? My treat, of course. The offer was made with the magnanimous air of someone doing charity work. Victoria recognized the tone because she'd used it herself at board meetings when discussing corporate social responsibility initiatives. That's very kind, Victoria said, standing to leave, but I'm fine paying my own way. Come on, don't be proud. I can afford it. I'm sure you can. Victoria gathered her purse dignity intact despite the crushing disappointment. Thank you for the coffee. She left Marcus sitting confused at his table, probably wondering why his charity case had suddenly developed a backbone. In her car, Victoria sat for several minutes before starting the engine. 7 men in 8 months, all following the same pattern. Interested until they thought she was broke, then either disappearing entirely or treating her like a grateful recipient of their generosity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Did I say something wrong? You seemed upset. Victoria deleted the message without responding. She drove home to her penthouse, peeled off her thrift store costume, and poured herself a glass of wine that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. The city sparkled below her floor-to-ceiling windows, millions of lights representing millions of lives she felt completely disconnected from. At 34, Victoria Hayes had everything money could buy and nothing money couldn't. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe it was time to try honesty. But honesty had never worked before. The moment men learned about her wealth, they stopped seeing Victoria and started seeing opportunity. They wanted to be rescued from their ordinary lives, wanted access to her world of private jets and exclusive events. She wanted someone who could love her for the person she was when all the money and power were stripped away. Someone who would choose her even if she had nothing to offer but herself. The problem was finding that person in a world where everyone had an agenda. Victoria opened her laptop and stared at her dating profile. Should she delete it entirely? Try a different approach. Move to another city where no one knew her name. Before she could decide, a new message popped up in her inbox. Hi Victoria, I'm Connor. I saw your profile and thought we might have some things in common. I'm a single dad, working construction, so I know what it's like to worry about money and try to build something meaningful from not much. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk and see if we click. Hope to hear from you. Victoria stared at the message. A single dad who worked construction. Someone who genuinely understood financial struggle. Someone who wasn't looking for a sugar mama or a trophy girlfriend. She clicked on Connor's profile. 36 years old, lived in a working-class neighborhood, had a daughter named Emma, who was 8. His photos showed a man with kind eyes and a genuine smile wearing jeans and work shirts instead of designer clothes. His profile was honest, almost to a fault. Recently widowed, working hard to provide for his daughter, looking for someone who understood that family came first. Not looking for hookups or games, just hoping to find someone genuine who might want to build something real together. Victoria found herself smiling for the first time all evening. Here was a man who led with vulnerability instead of machismo, who talked about his daughter with obvious love, who seemed more interested in emotional connection than physical attraction. She began typing a response. Hi Connor, I'd love to meet for coffee. You're right that we probably have some things in common. I know what it's like to worry about money and try to build something meaningful. There's a little place called the Corner Grind on 16th Street that has great coffee and a quiet atmosphere. Would Saturday afternoon work for you? She hesitated before hitting send. This felt different. Connor seemed different. Maybe this time her deception would be worth it. Saturday afternoon, Victoria stood outside the corner grind in her carefully chosen outfit. Dark jeans from Target, a sweater from a discount store, shoes that looked worn but clean. She'd practiced her broke girl persona until it felt natural, until she could almost believe it herself. Connor arrived 5 minutes early, just as his profile had suggested he would. He was taller than she'd expected, with broad shoulders that spoke of physical work and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he still found joy despite life's hardships. Victoria Connor's smile was warm and genuine as he approached. "I'm Connor. Thank you for agreeing to meet me." "Of course. Thank you for suggesting it." They found a table in the corner, away from the Saturday afternoon crowd of laptop-wielding freelancers and college students. Victoria ordered her usual small black coffee. Connor got the same, and she noticed him checking the prices carefully before ordering. So Connor said, settling into his chair, "Tell me about yourself. What kind of graphic design do you do?" Victoria had prepared for this question. "Mostly small business stuff, when I can find it. Logo designs, business cards, some web work. It's been slow lately, though. I can imagine. The economy's been rough on people like us." People like us. The phrase hit Victoria unexpectedly. When was the last time anyone had considered her part of an us that didn't involve board meetings and profit margins? "What about you?" Victoria asked. "How long have you been in construction?" "About 8 years now. Started as a laborer right after my wife died. Worked my way up to foreman. It's steady work, and the guys I work with are good people." "Your wife, if you don't mind me asking?" "Cancer. Emma was only 5 when we lost her." Connor's expression grew soft and sad. "Sarah was the strongest person I knew. Fought for 18 months before she couldn't fight anymore." "I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult. The hardest thing I've ever been through. But Emma needed me to keep going, so that's what I did." Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. She'd expected to feel sympathy for Connor's loss, but she hadn't expected to feel such admiration for his strength. He spoke about his wife with love instead of bitterness about his responsibilities, without self-pity. 8 years of single parenting, Victoria said. "That's amazing. You must be a wonderful father." "I try to be. Emma's the most important thing in my life. She's smart, funny kind, everything good about her mother, plus some things that are all her own." Connor pulled out his phone, showing Victoria pictures of a little girl with long brown hair and a gap-toothed grin. Emma at a school play. Emma covered in finger paint. Emma asleep with a book on her chest. "She's beautiful," Victoria said, and meant it. The love in Connor's voice when he talked about his daughter was unmistakable. "What about you?" Connor asked, putting his phone away. "Any kids?" "No," Victoria said, and for the first time in years, that felt like a genuine loss rather than a relief. "I always thought I would, but work kept getting in the way. Now it feels like maybe I missed my chance." 34 isn't too late," Connor said gently, "and step-parenting is just as real as biological parenting if you find the right situation." The word step-parenting hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility that Victoria hadn't expected to feel. They talked for 2 hours until the afternoon crowd gave way to the dinner rush, and they realized they'd been nursing the same coffees for far too long. Connor was easy to talk to, asking thoughtful questions and listening to her answers with genuine interest. When it was time to leave, Connor walked her to her car, his hand hovering protectively near her back without quite touching. "I had a really nice time," Connor said. "Would you like to do this again?" "Maybe dinner next time. I'd like that very much." "Great. I should warn you, though, I'm not exactly fine dining material. More of a family restaurant kind of guy." "That sounds perfect," Victoria said, and realized she meant it. She was tired of men who tried to impress her with expensive meals and exclusive venues. Connor's honesty was refreshing. As she drove home in her Honda, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced after a first date in years. Hope. Connor was everything his profile had promised: genuine, kind, devoted to his daughter, and completely uninterested in impressing her with material things. For the first time since she'd started this experiment, Victoria felt guilty about the deception. Connor deserved honesty, deserved to make an informed choice about whether he wanted to date her. But the thought of watching his warm smile turn to calculation when he learned about her wealth was unbearable. Just a few more dates, Victoria told herself. Just long enough to be sure his feelings were real before she risked destroying them with the truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Thank you for a wonderful afternoon. Emma's with her babysitter until 7 if you'd like to grab a quick dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, but there's a great little Mexican place that does amazing street tacos." Victoria stared at the message. Connor wasn't playing games or following arbitrary dating rules. He was simply interested and willing to say so. She texted back, "I'd love to. Just tell me where to meet you." As she drove toward the address Connor had sent, Victoria told herself this was still part of the test. She needed to be absolutely certain of Connor's character before revealing the truth. But deep down she knew the real reason she was continuing the deception. She was falling in love, and she was terrified. The Mexican restaurant was exactly the kind of place unemployed Victoria would love, and billionaire Victoria would never have discovered. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lighting, and the most incredible smells drifting from a tiny kitchen where an elderly woman hand-pressed tortillas. Connor was already there when Victoria arrived, having clearly showered and changed after work. He stood when he saw her, that same warm smile lighting up his face. "This place doesn't look like much," Connor said, pulling out her chair, "but I promise the food is amazing." "It smells incredible," Victoria said honestly. She'd eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants around the world, but something about this tiny family establishment felt more appealing than any of them. They ordered street tacos and horchata, and Victoria watched Connor calculate the total in his head before confirming their order. The casual way he managed his budget impressed her. No shame or embarrassment, just careful financial planning that had become second nature. So Connor said, biting into his carnitas taco, "What's your living situation like? Roommates treating you okay?" Victoria had prepared this lie carefully. "Yeah, I live with 2 other women in Capitol Hill. It's not ideal, but it's what I can afford right now. One of them is a teacher, the other works retail. We make it work. I know that life well. After Sarah died, Emma and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for 3 years while I saved up to afford something bigger. She slept in the bedroom, I took the couch. Not glamorous, but we were together. That must have been hard. In some ways, but in other ways it was good for us. We got really close during those years. Now she tells me everything because she learned early that we only had each other." Victoria felt a stab of shame. Here was a man who'd sacrificed comfort to provide stability for his daughter, while she was lying about her circumstances to someone who genuinely understood struggle. The conversation moved to lighter topics. Connor told her funny stories about construction work and his co-workers. Victoria found herself relaxing, laughing at his tales of job site mishaps and the ongoing personality conflicts between various crew members. "You're easy to talk to," Connor said as they finished their meal. "I was nervous about dating again. It's been almost 3 years since Sarah died, and I wasn't sure I remembered how to connect with someone new." "You're doing fine," Victoria assured him. "Better than fine." When the check came, Connor reached for it immediately. Victoria started to protest, but he shook his head. "I asked you out, I pay. Besides, this isn't exactly breaking the bank." Victoria watched him leave cash on the table, probably calculating tip down to the percentage. The total was less than she spent on coffee some mornings, but she could see it represented a meaningful expense for him. Walking to her car, Connor surprised her by taking her hand. His palms were calloused from construction work, warm and strong, and completely different from the soft hands of the executives she usually dated. "I'd like to see you again," Connor said. Maybe next weekend. Emma's going to a sleepover at her friend's house Saturday night, so I could take you somewhere a little nicer if you'd like. Somewhere nicer meant somewhere more expensive, Victoria realized. Connor was planning to stretch his budget for her. Actually, Victoria said quickly, I'd love to meet Emma if you think she's ready for that. Maybe we could do something family-friendly instead. Connor's face lit up. Really, you'd want to meet her? Of course. She's the most important person in your life. If we're going to keep seeing each other, I'd like to know her. Connor squeezed her hand. Most women I've tried to date haven't been interested in the single dad package. They want the man, but not the complications. Emma isn't a complication, Victoria said firmly. She's part of what makes you who you are. Connor pulled Victoria into a gentle hug, and she breathed in the scent of sawdust and soap and something essentially masculine that made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. Thank you, Connor, whispered against her hair. For understanding. For being interested in my whole life, not just the convenient parts. As Victoria drove home, she felt the weight of her deception settling heavier on her shoulders. Connor was falling for someone who didn't exist. The longer she waited to tell the truth, the more devastating it would be when he discovered her lies. But the thought of losing him, before she'd even had a chance to explore what they might build together was unbearable. Just a little longer, Victoria promised herself, just until she was sure this was real. 3 months into their relationship, Victoria had perfected the art of compartmentalization. Monday through Friday, she commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. Evenings and weekends belonged to Connor and Emma, to simple dinners and homework help and bedtime stories. She'd almost convinced herself the double life was sustainable. That delicate balance shattered on a Tuesday morning when her assistant burst into her office without knocking. Miss Hayes, we have a situation. Victoria looked up from quarterly projections, noting Patricia's pale complexion and shaking hands. In 5 years of working together, Patricia had never looked this rattled. There's a reporter downstairs, Marcy Chen from Denver Business Weekly. She's asking about your personal life. Victoria's blood turned to ice. What specifically? She says someone tipped her off about you dating under false pretenses, testing men by pretending to be unemployed and broke. Patricia's voice dropped to a whisper. She has photos, Miss Hayes, of you at that taco restaurant on Colfax, dressed down with a man and a little girl. The room tilted slightly. Victoria gripped her desk mind, racing through possibilities. Who could have seen them? How had they connected her public persona to her disguise? She wants a statement, Patricia continued. Says the story runs with or without your comment by 5 o'clock. Victoria's phone buzzed with Connor's name on the screen. Their usual good morning text, probably telling her about Emma's latest art project or sharing some sweet detail about their breakfast routine. The normalcy of it made her want to vomit. Handle the reporter. Victoria said, her voice steadier than she felt. Standard no comment on personal matters response. And Patricia. Not a word of this to anyone on staff. After Patricia left, Victoria sat in her leather chair, surrounded by the trappings of success, and watched her 2 worlds collide in real time. Her phone continued buzzing with Connor's unanswered text, while her computer screen showed Hayes' digital stock prices and merger proposals. She had maybe 6 hours before the story went live. 6 hours to figure out how to tell Connor the truth before he read about her deception in the business pages. Victoria tried calling him twice during lunch, but both calls went to voicemail. Connor was probably on a job site where personal phones weren't allowed. She left a carefully neutral message asking if they could meet that evening, something important to discuss. By 3 p.m., Victoria's nerves were shredded. She'd snapped at 2 assistants and walked out of a crucial meeting about European expansion. Her hands shook as she checked Denver Business Weekly's website every few minutes, waiting for the axe to fall. At 4:30, her phone rang. Connor's number. Hey, his voice was tight, different. I got your message. What did you want to talk about? Can you come over tonight? To my place. The words tumbled out. I need to explain some things. Your place. Connor's confusion was evident. You mean your apartment with the roommates? Victoria's heart pounded. Actually, that's part of what I need to explain. Can you come to this address? She rattled off her penthouse location, holding her breath. The silence stretched so long, Victoria wondered if the call had dropped. Victoria Connor's voice was very quiet. That's the Meridian building. The luxury high-rise downtown? Yes. Another pause. I don't understand. I know. Just please come. Let me explain everything. I'll be there at 7, Connor said, and hung up. Victoria spent the next 2 hours pacing her penthouse, rehearsing explanations that all sounded inadequate. How do you tell someone you've built a relationship on lies? How do you explain that everything they think they know about you is false? At 6:45, her computer chimed with a news alert. Denver Business Weekly had posted the story early. CEO's Secret Hayes Digital's Victoria Hayes caught faking poverty to test dates. Victoria's hands trembled as she read about her own deception laid out in black and white. Photos of her in both personas, boardroom Victoria in designer suits, broke Victoria in thrift store clothes. The article speculated about her motives, quoted anonymous sources about her past relationships, painted her as a wealthy woman playing games with working-class men's emotions. Connor's name wasn't mentioned, thankfully, but the photos made it clear she'd been deceiving someone specific. Someone with a daughter who'd gotten caught up in the lie. At exactly 7 o'clock, Victoria's doorman called. Miss Hayes. There's a Connor Mitchell here to see you. Send him up. Victoria opened her door to find Connor standing in the marble hallway looking completely out of place in his work clothes and scuffed boots. His expression was unreadable, but she could see tension in every line of his body. Connor. Is it true? He held up his phone, showing the Denver Business Weekly article. Tell me this isn't true. Victoria's throat closed. Come inside. Please. Connor stepped into her penthouse, his eyes taking in the marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the custom furniture that cost more than most people's yearly salary. When he turned back to her, his expression had hardened into something she'd never seen before. You're really her. The CEO. You're worth... He glanced at his phone. $350 million. Connor let me explain. Explain what? His voice was rising. That you've been lying to me for 3 months. That every story about being unemployed, every time I paid for dinner with money I could barely afford, every moment you let me worry about your financial situation. All of it was fake. Victoria flinched at the pain in his voice. My feelings weren't fake. Everything I told you about myself, about my family, about how I feel about you, that was all real. But you're not unemployed. You're not broke. You're not even close to being the person I thought I was falling in love with. Connor ran his hands through his hair, pacing her living room. Do you have any idea what this means? I introduced you to my daughter. I let Emma get attached to you. I let myself believe that we were equals, that we understood each other's struggles, that we were building something together. Connor's laugh was bitter. Meanwhile, you were probably laughing at my cheap dates and second-hand clothes. No, Victoria said fiercely. I never laughed. I never thought less of you. If anything, watching you work so hard for everything you have, seeing how you prioritize Emma over everything else, it made me admire you more. From your ivory tower, Connor shot back, looking down at the poor construction worker and his cute kid. Was this all some kind of social experiment for you? Slumming it with the working class? The accusation hit Victoria like a physical blow. You know that's not true. You know me, Connor. The woman you've been spending time with, the one who loves Emma's drawings and helps with homework. That's who I really am. I don't know who you really are, Connor said quietly. The woman I thought I knew would never lie for 3 months about something this fundamental. She would never let me embarrass myself paying for dates I couldn't afford while she had millions in the bank. She would never watch me stress about Emma's school expenses while sitting on enough money to solve every problem we have. Victoria felt tears spilling down her cheeks. I was scared, Connor. Every relationship I've ever had fell apart the moment men learned about my money. They stopped seeing me and started seeing dollar signs. I needed to know someone could love me for who I am, not what I have. So you decided for me? Connor said. You decided I couldn't handle the truth that I wasn't strong enough or good enough to love you anyway. You took away my choice and replaced it with lies. The truth of his words hit Victoria harder than any business failure ever had. She had robbed him of agency, of the ability to make an informed decision about their relationship. She'd treated him like a test subject rather than a partner. I was going to tell you, she said weakly. When, after we got married, after Emma started calling you Mom, how long were you planning to keep this up? Victoria didn't have an answer that didn't sound selfish and calculating. Connor moved toward the door and panic flooded Victoria's system. Please don't leave. We can work through this. I love you, Connor. That was never a lie. He turned back and the pain in his eyes nearly broke her. You let me introduce you to my daughter. You became part of her life, her routine, her sense of security. And this whole time you were living a lie. His voice cracked. Do you have any idea what it's going to do to her when I have to explain why you're not coming around anymore? You don't have to explain anything. We can figure this out together. No, Connor said firmly. We can't. I can't trust you, Victoria. How could I? You've been lying about the most basic facts of your life since the day we met. Every conversation we've had has been filtered through your deception. Victoria felt her world cracking apart. Connor, please, I need you to stay away from us, Connor said, his hand on the door. Emma's been through enough loss in her life. I won't let her get hurt because I was stupid enough to fall for someone who was playing games. I wasn't playing games. I love you. I love her. Connor looked at her one last time, and Victoria saw something die in his expression. If you loved us, you would have trusted us with the truth. The door closed behind him with devastating finality, leaving Victoria alone in her marble palace with the sound of her own sobbing echoing off walls that had never felt colder. The next morning brought a fresh wave of humiliation. Victoria's deception was front-page news in the business section, and her phone had been ringing non-stop with reporters requesting interviews. She'd turned it off after the 15th call, but the silence in her penthouse felt worse than the chaos. Patricia had fielded dozens of media requests, scheduled 3 emergency board meetings, and diplomatically handled the flood of curious colleagues and competitors who suddenly wanted to discuss Victoria's interesting personal life choices. The professional fallout was manageable. Hayes Digital was too successful and too valuable for one personal scandal to damage its core business. The personal fallout was devastating. Victoria hadn't eaten in 18 hours. She'd tried Connor's number 4 times, each call going straight to voicemail. She'd driven by his apartment building twice, but his truck wasn't in its usual spot, and she couldn't bring herself to knock on his door uninvited. By Wednesday evening, desperation drove her to call the only person who might have contact information for Connor's worksite. Maya Victoria's voice was hoarse from crying. I need a favor. Jesus, Victoria. I saw the news. Are you okay? I need Connor's work address. Or his boss's number. Something. He won't take my calls. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Honey, maybe you should give him some time. He's probably processing. I need to explain. If I could just talk to him face to face, make him understand why I did it. Why did you do it? Maya asked gently. Really? Because that article made it sound like you were conducting some kind of social experiment. Victoria closed her eyes, leaning against her kitchen counter. Because I was terrified. Because every man I've dated in the past 5 years wanted my money more than me. Because I needed to know someone could see me as just Victoria, not as a bank account with legs. And you found that. I found the most genuine, honest, kind man I've ever met. And I destroyed it by being dishonest with him. Maya sighed. Victoria, I love you, but you have to see how messed up this was. You let Connor pay for dates he couldn't afford while you have more money than some small countries. You watched him worry about his daughter's expenses while you could have solved every problem they have. That's not testing his character, that's manipulating his circumstances. The words hit Victoria like physical blows because they were true. In her fear of being used, she'd used Connor instead. I know, Victoria whispered. I know I was wrong. But Maya, I love him. Really love him. And Emma. God! Emma drew me into their family portrait. She's going to be heartbroken. Then you should have thought about that before you started lying. Victoria deserved the harsh words, but they didn't make them hurt less. Will you help me or not? After another pause, Maya said, Connor works for Mountain View Construction. That's all I'm giving you. And Victoria, maybe consider that the kind of man you fell in love with deserves better than having to wonder if everything about your relationship was fake. Victoria drove to the Mountain View Construction office in her real car, a silver Lexus that cost more than Connor made in 2 years. She felt exposed without her broke girl disguise, but there was no point in more deception. The construction company occupied a small building in an industrial area of Denver. The parking lot was full of work trucks and equipment trailers. Victoria's luxury car looked as out of place as she felt. Inside, a receptionist looked up from her desk with polite curiosity. Can I help you? I'm looking for Connor Mitchell. Is he here? Connor's on site today. Can I take a message? Victoria's heart sank. Do you know which site? I'm sorry, but I can't give out that information. Company policy. Victoria was about to leave when the door opened and a man in a hard hat and reflective vest walked in. She recognized him from the photos on Connor's phone, Joe, the site supervisor, who'd become something of a mentor to Connor. Excuse me, Victoria said, approaching him. Are you Joe Hendricks? Joe looked her up and down, taking in her expensive clothes and clearly calculating whether she was someone important enough to deal with. Depends who's asking. I'm Victoria Hayes. I was dating Connor Mitchell. I need to talk to him. Recognition flashed in Joe's eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like disgust. You're the one from the news. The rich lady who was pretending to be poor. Victoria's cheeks burned. Yes. But it's not what you think. I think Joe interrupted that you played games with a good man who's been through hell. Connor's one of the best workers I've got, and one of the best fathers I know. He didn't deserve whatever this was. You're right, Victoria said quietly. He didn't deserve it. That's why I need to apologize, to explain. Joe studied her for a long moment. He's not going to want to see you. I know, but I have to try. He's at the Morrison site, Building 4, 3rd floor. But Lady Joe's expression was serious. That man's got enough problems without rich people treating him like entertainment. If you're not serious about making this right, stay away. Victoria nodded and left before she could lose her nerve. The Morrison site was a luxury condominium complex under construction. Victoria found Building 4 easily enough, but getting past security required explaining who she was and who she needed to see. The guards recognized her name from the news and exchanged glances that made Victoria want to disappear. She climbed 3 flights of unfinished stairs, following the sound of power tools and voices. The 3rd floor was a skeleton of walls and exposed beams, dusty and loud with construction activity. Victoria spotted Connor immediately. He was bent over architectural plans, with another worker pointing at something and explaining installation details. His hard hat was pushed back, revealing the face she'd grown to love, now set in lines of concentration and exhaustion. Connor. He looked up, and Victoria watched shock, anger, and pain flash across his features in rapid succession. The other worker glanced between them, clearly sensing tension. "Take 15. Martinez," Connor said, without taking his eyes off Victoria. After his co-worker left, Connor straightened slowly, crossing his arms over his chest. "What are you doing here? I needed to see you." "To explain." "There's nothing to explain. You lied. For months. About everything." Victoria stepped closer, noting how Connor instinctively moved backward. "Not about everything. My feelings for you, for Emma, those were real. My past, my family, the way I feel when I'm with you, all real, filtered through lies about who you are and what your life looks like." Connor's voice was flat, controlled. "Do you have any idea what the last 2 days have been like? Reporters calling my workplace asking about the mystery construction worker who was dating the CEO. Having to explain to Emma why you're not coming to dinner anymore." Victoria's heart broke a little more. "What did you tell her? That you had to go away for work? That sometimes adults have to make hard choices?" Connor's jaw tightened. I couldn't tell an 8-year-old that the woman she'd started thinking of as family was lying to us the whole time. "Connor, please. I know I was wrong to lie, but nothing." Connor interrupted. "You watched me struggle to pay for dates. You let me feel embarrassed about not being able to afford nice restaurants or expensive activities. You sat in my tiny apartment and acted like you understood what it was like to worry about money." Victoria flinched. "I do understand. You understand nothing." Connor's control was cracking, his voice rising. "You've never had to choose between groceries and your kids' school supplies. You've never worked double shifts to afford dance lessons or lost sleep over medical bills. You live in a world where money is infinite, and you played pretend in mine. I was trying to find someone who could love me, not for my money. So you made sure I never had the chance to make that choice myself." Connor shot back. "You decided I couldn't handle the truth, that I wasn't mature enough or secure enough to love you anyway." The accusation hit Victoria because it was partially true. She had made assumptions about Connor's character, about his ability to see past her wealth to the woman underneath. "You're right," Victoria said quietly. "I robbed you of the choice. I treated you like you couldn't be trusted with the truth. And I was wrong." Connor's anger seemed to deflate, slightly replaced by exhaustion. "Victoria, I don't know what you want from me. An absolution, forgiveness, the chance to start over. I want the chance to prove that my feelings are real, that we could have something genuine if we start with honesty. We've been together for 3 months, Connor said. 3 months of me believing we were equals, that we understood each other's lives. Now I find out you're worth more money than I'll see in 10 lifetimes, and you were watching me like some kind of—" He paused, searching for words. "Like I was a specimen in a lab. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You had a hypothesis. Poor men are more genuine than rich men, and you tested it by creating false conditions." Connor picked up his hard hat, preparing to leave. "I was your experiment, Victoria, and experiments end." Victoria felt desperate tears threatening. "Connor, I love you. That was never fake." Maybe Connor said. "But I'll never know for sure, will I? Because I never knew the real you. I knew a character you played." He walked away, leaving Victoria standing alone among construction debris and unfinished walls, surrounded by the skeleton of someone else's dream home. Victoria returned to her penthouse to find 3 reporters camped outside her building and 17 missed calls from board members. The professional crisis was escalating. Hayes' digital stock had dropped 3%, and competitors were using the scandal to question the company's leadership stability. But Victoria couldn't focus on market fluctuations or corporate governance. All she could think about was Connor's face when he'd called her an experiment, and the fact that somewhere across town, Emma was probably asking why Victoria had disappeared from their lives. She poured herself a glass of wine that cost more than Connor's weekly grocery budget, and sat by her floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city lights that had once made her feel powerful. Now they just made her feel isolated 40 stories above the real world where real people dealt with real problems. Her phone rang. Maya. How did it go? Maya asked without preamble. Terribly. He hates me. He thinks I was using him as an experiment. Weren't you? Victoria wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat. Looking back at her actions with brutal honesty, she could see how Connor would interpret her behavior. She'd created false conditions to test his character, manipulated their circumstances to ensure he'd treat her a certain way. I didn't mean it like that, Victoria said weakly. Intentions matter, but impact matters more. And the impact on Connor and Emma is devastating. Victoria closed her eyes. Emma drew me into their family portrait, Maya. She called me family. And I've destroyed that. Then you better figure out how to fix it. If it can be fixed. After Maya hung up, Victoria spent the night researching everything she could find about Connor's life. Public records showed he'd lost his house after Sarah's death. Medical bills and funeral expenses had crushed them financially. He'd been working construction for 8 years, steadily moving up from laborer to foreman. Emma attended public school, participated in free art programs, qualified for reduced lunch prices. The picture that emerged was of a man working incredibly hard to provide stability for his daughter while battling his own grief and financial stress. Victoria had walked into that struggle and lied about understanding it while having the resources to solve every problem they faced. Thursday morning brought worse news. A gossip blogger had identified Connor publishing his full name and workplace. The article speculated about whether he'd known about Victoria's wealth, painting him as either a victim or a gold digger. Victoria immediately called her lawyer about cease and desist orders, but the damage was spreading. By Friday, Victoria couldn't stand the isolation anymore. She drove to Emma's school, parking across the street and waiting for dismissal. She needed to see for herself that Emma was okay, even if she couldn't speak to her. Emma emerged from the building walking with Mrs. Chen, her small hand clutched tightly in the elderly woman's. Even from a distance, Victoria could see that Emma's usual bouncy energy was subdued. No skipping, no animated chatter, just a little girl walking quietly beside her caregiver. Victoria's heart shattered completely. Mrs. Chen spotted Victoria's car and said something to Emma, who looked up with sudden hope. The little girl started to wave, but Mrs. Chen gently guided her hand down, shaking her head. Victoria watched Emma's face fall, and the sight was unbearable. Victoria drove home crying so hard she had to pull over twice. That evening her doorman called. "Miss Hayes, there's an elderly Chinese woman here to see you. Says her name is Mrs." Chen. Victoria's pulse quickened. "Send her up." Mrs. Chen arrived looking exactly as Victoria remembered, tiny, dignified, wearing a practical coat and carrying a purse that had seen many years of use. But her expression was stern in a way Victoria had never seen before. "Mrs. Chen, please come in." "Can I offer you tea, or I come to talk?" Mrs. Chen interrupted. "About Emma. About Connor. About the hurt you caused." Victoria led her to the living room, acutely aware of how her luxury furniture must look to someone who'd watched Connor struggle to pay rent. "Emma asks every day when you're coming back," Mrs. Chen said without sitting down. "She doesn't understand why Victoria disappeared. She thinks maybe she did something wrong." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. "Oh God, please tell her it's not her fault. Tell her she's perfect and wonderful, and I tell her many things. But 8-year-old girl, she doesn't understand grown-up problems." Mrs. Chen's eyes were sharp. "She draws pictures now. Sad pictures. Family with someone missing. Victoria covered her face with her hands. I never wanted to hurt her. I love that little girl. Love Mrs. Chen's voice was skeptical. You love Emma, but you lie to her father for months. You watch Connor pay for dates with money he saves from food. Budget, this is love. Victoria forced herself to meet Mrs. Chen's eyes. I was scared. I was protecting myself. Protecting yourself by hurting them. Mrs. Chen finally sat down. Her posture rigid. Connor is good man, best man I know. He work hard, love his daughter, treat people with respect. When Sarah died, he could have given up. Many men would. But he fought to keep Emma happy, keep her safe. He deserves better than lies. You're right, Victoria whispered. He deserves better than me. Maybe. But Emma, she loves you. Real love, not fake love, like you showed Connor. And Connor. Mrs. Chen paused, studying Victoria carefully. Connor cries at night. I hear through walls. He misses you, even though he's angry. Victoria's breath caught. He misses me. Of course he misses you. He loves you. Real love, the kind that doesn't care about money. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. Question is, do you love him enough to do hard work to fix what you broke? I would do anything, Victoria said immediately. But he won't talk to me, won't see me, because you broke trust. Trust is like glass once broken, very hard to put back together, but may be possible if person works very, very hard and shows they changed. Mrs. Chen stood to leave. Emma has art show next week at community center. Thursday evening. She made special picture wants to show you. Connor said, no, you cannot come. But maybe you find way to see Emma's art without making Connor angry. Mrs. Chen. Why are you telling me this? Why help me? The elderly woman paused at the door. Because Emma needs family. Connor needs partner. You need to learn that love is not about protecting yourself, is about protecting others, even when it's scary. After Mrs. Chen left, Victoria sat in her empty penthouse and made a decision. She couldn't force Connor to forgive her, but she could try to show him and herself that her love was real enough to fight for. Thursday evening she would find a way to see Emma's art show, not to confront Connor or demand forgiveness, but to support a little girl who'd called her family and whose heart was breaking because the adults in her life had messed everything up. It was a small step, but it was honest. And honesty, Victoria was learning, was the only foundation worth building on. The Denver Community Arts Center buzzed with the energy of proud parents and excited children. Victoria had arrived early, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, not her broke girl costume, just clothes that wouldn't draw attention. She'd positioned herself in the back corner behind a display of pottery where she could see Emma's section without Connor spotting her immediately. Emma stood beside her artwork wearing a purple dress that Victoria recognized from their shopping trip to the thrift store. Connor had mentioned needing fancy clothes for the art show, and Victoria had suggested the consignment shop where she'd bought her original disguise. The irony was bitter now she'd helped them find affordable formal wear, while hiding the fact that she could have dressed Emma in designer clothes without blinking. The little girl's display was impossible to miss. 3 paintings hung on the wall, a family of elephants helping each other across a river, a wolf pack running together under the stars, and in the center, a house with 3 people holding hands in the yard. But this version was different from the school portrait. The woman figure was smaller, positioned slightly apart from the man and child, as if she might disappear at any moment. Victoria's throat tightened. Even Emma's 8-year-old mind had processed the instability Victoria had brought into their lives. Beautiful work, isn't it? An elderly man appeared beside Victoria, studying Emma's paintings with genuine appreciation. That little girl has real talent, and such emotional depth for someone so young. She's remarkable, Victoria agreed softly. Are you a relative? Friend of the family. Victoria hesitated. What was she now? I used to be close to her and her father. It's complicated now. The man nodded sympathetically. Adult relationships often are. But that little girl's art tells a story about love and loss and hope. Whatever happened, she's processing it through her creativity. That's healthy. Victoria watched Emma explaining her paintings to other visitors, her animated gestures and bright smile masking the sadness Victoria could see in the family portrait. Connor stood nearby, clearly proud but exhausted, dark circles under his eyes that matched Victoria's own. Emma, a classmate, called out, "Come see my sculpture." As Emma ran off, Connor was left alone by her display. Victoria saw him looking at the family painting with an expression that broke her heart, love mixed with exhaustion, and something that looked like longing. Victoria made a decision that was equal parts brave and foolish. She approached Connor's side, keeping her voice low so nearby families wouldn't overhear. "Her work is incredible," Victoria said quietly. "She's got such a gift." Connor tensed but didn't turn around. "You shouldn't be here." "I know, but I needed to see her art. Mrs. Chen mentioned the show and I—" Victoria paused. "I'll leave if you want. I just wanted to see how she's doing." Connor finally looked at her, and Victoria was shocked by the change in his appearance. He'd lost weight, and his usually warm eyes looked hollow. "She asks about you every day," Connor said quietly. "She doesn't understand why adults can't just apologize and be friends again." "Can we apologize and be friends?" Victoria's voice was barely audible. "I don't know," Connor admitted. "I'm still angry, Victoria. Really angry. But I'm also tired of being angry, and Emma misses you so much it's breaking my heart. I miss her too. I miss you both." They stood in uncomfortable silence, watching other families enjoy the evening that should have included all three of them. Connor: "I know you have no reason to trust anything I say, but I need you to know something." Victoria took a steadying breath. "I've been volunteering at the Denver rescue mission every weekend since our fight. Serving meals, helping with donations, working with families who are actually struggling financially." Connor looked surprised. "Why? Because I needed to understand what real hardship looks like. Not the sanitized version I imagined, but the actual daily reality of people who worry about rent and food and medical bills." Victoria's voice grew stronger. "I've been learning what it really means to struggle and what it takes to maintain dignity and kindness when life is hard. And I realized how incredibly privileged and sheltered I've been, how much I took for granted, how little I understood about the world you navigate every day." Victoria met his eyes. "I'm not telling you this for forgiveness points. I'm telling you because I needed to become someone worthy of the love you offered me." Connor studied her face carefully. "You're different. I can see it. I hope so. The woman who lied to you for 3 months was scared and selfish. I'm trying to be better than that." Victoria. Connor started, then stopped as Emma came bounding back. "Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to know if we can display my elephant painting at the school next month," and Emma stopped short when she saw Victoria. Her whole face lit up like sunrise. Victoria. "You came." "Daddy said you couldn't. But you're here." Emma launched herself at Victoria, who caught her in a fierce hug that smelled like strawberry shampoo and paint. "I missed you so much," Emma whispered against Victoria's shoulder. "I missed you too, sweetheart." Connor watched this reunion with an expression Victoria couldn't read. When Emma finally pulled back, she grabbed both adults' hands. "Are you going to start having dinner with us again? I learned how to make grilled cheese by myself, and Mrs. Chen taught me to fold dumplings." Victoria looked at Connor, who appeared to be wrestling with internal conflict. "Emma," Connor said carefully, "Victoria and I need to talk about grown-up things first. She might not be able to have dinner with us right away." Emma's face fell, but she nodded with the resignation of a child who'd learned that adult problems didn't always have kid-friendly solutions. "But you could still be friends, right?" Emma asked hopefully. "Friends can see each other sometimes." Victoria felt her heart breaking all over again. "We're working on it, sweetheart. These things take time." Emma hugged Victoria once more, then skipped back to her paintings to talk with other visitors. Connor and Victoria were left standing awkwardly among the families and artwork. "She's the most important thing in my life," Connor said finally. "I can't let her get hurt again. I know. I would never want to hurt her. But you did hurt her, whether you meant to or not." Victoria nodded. "You're right. And I have to live with that. But Connor, if there's any chance you could consider giving me another opportunity to show you who I really am, the real me. No lies, no pretense. I promise I'll spend every day proving that my feelings for you and Emma are genuine." Connor was quiet for a long moment. "I need time to think." "Of course. And if we try to rebuild something, it has to be completely different. Complete honesty about everything. No more secrets, no more games." Victoria's heart leaped. "Yes, absolutely. I mean everything, Victoria. Your work, your life, your world. I need to understand all of it, not just the parts you think I can handle. I understand." Connor looked around the art center at families enjoying simple pleasures together. "This is my world. Community centers and public schools and thrift store clothes. If we're going to try again, you need to be sure you can actually be part of this without feeling like you're slumming it." "This is the world I want to be part of," Victoria said. "Not because it's quaint or charming, but because it's real. Because you and Emma are here." Connor nodded slowly. "Okay, we can try talking. Coffee. Neutral ground. No promises beyond that." Victoria felt tears of gratitude threatening. "Thank you." As they made arrangements to meet the following week, Emma came running back one more time. "Victoria, look." She held up a small watercolor painting. "I made this for you. It's a butterfly like the one we painted together." Victoria accepted the painting with shaking hands. It was beautiful, delicate wings in shades of blue and purple hovering over painted flowers. "Emma, this is the most wonderful gift anyone's ever given me. Really better than expensive presents." Victoria caught Connor's eye over Emma's head. "Much better, because it comes from your heart." As Victoria walked to her car, carefully holding Emma's painting, she felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. It was fragile and conditional, and might not survive the difficult conversations ahead, but it was real. Connor was willing to try. That was more than she'd dared to expect, and exactly what she needed to begin earning back the trust she'd shattered. The coffee shop Connor chose for their first real conversation was different from the one where they'd met a chain restaurant on neutral ground, nothing that carried memories of their deception-based beginning. Victoria arrived first, ordering black coffee, and sitting at a table by the window watching Connor's truck pull into the parking lot. He looked nervous, running his hand through his hair as he approached the entrance. Victoria felt her stomach flip with anxiety and hope in equal measure. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said, as Connor sat across from her. "To be honest, I almost didn't." Connor ordered coffee, then settled back in his chair. "But Emma's been asking so many questions, and I realized I needed answers too. Real answers this time." Victoria nodded. "Ask me anything. I'll tell you the complete truth, no matter how it makes me look." Connor studied her face. "Start with why you really did it. Not the surface reason about testing men, but the deeper reason. Why did you need to lie?" Victoria took a breath. This was the question she'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. "When I was 22, my parents died in a plane crash. Small aircraft, mechanical failure, no survivors. Victoria's voice remained steady, but Connor could see the pain in her eyes. I inherited their technology company, which was struggling at the time. I threw myself into saving it, partly because I needed something to focus on, besides grief, partly because it was all I had left of them. Connor listened without interrupting. I built Hayes Digital from almost nothing. 18-hour days, sleeping in my office, no social life, no relationships, just work. By the time I looked up 10 years later, I was worth hundreds of millions of dollars and completely isolated. So you started dating, Connor prompted. I tried, but every man I met wanted the CEO, not Victoria. They'd research my company before first dates. They'd have business proposals instead of flowers. They'd talk about prenups before we'd even kissed. Victoria's laugh was bitter. I realized I'd become a bank account with a person attached. Connor's expression softened slightly. That must have been lonely. It was devastating. I'd sacrificed everything to build something meaningful, but success had made genuine connection impossible. So I started testing people. Testing how Victoria felt shame creeping up her neck. I'd show up to dates dressed down, claiming to be unemployed or working retail. 6 men before you ran for the exits the moment they thought I had no money to offer them. And then you met me. And you were different. You were kind to someone you thought was struggling. You paid for dates you couldn't afford, and never made me feel like a burden. You talked about your daughter with such love, and you treated me like I mattered, just because I was a person sitting across from you. Connor was quiet for a moment. But you never thought about just being honest from the start. Seeing if I could handle the truth. This was the hardest question because it revealed the worst of her character. I was too afraid, Victoria admitted. By the second date, I was already falling for you. The thought of watching your opinion of me change once you knew about the money was terrifying. So I kept lying, telling myself I'd come clean once I was sure you really loved me. But you never could be sure because I never knew the real you. Exactly. Victoria felt tears threatening. I created an impossible situation where I needed your love to feel safe enough to tell the truth, but your love was based on a lie. It was a cycle I didn't know how to break. Connor stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Victoria, I need to understand something. When you watched me struggle to pay for dates, when you saw me stress about Emma's school expenses, how did you justify not helping? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. I told myself it would blow my cover. That if I helped financially, you'd know something was wrong. So you prioritized maintaining your lie over easing my struggles. Yes, Victoria whispered. And that's the part I'm most ashamed of. I let you suffer when I could have helped all to protect myself. Connor leaned back in his chair, processing this admission. Do you have any idea what it was like working double shifts to afford Emma's dance lessons, choosing between groceries and gas money, lying awake wondering if I was failing her by not being able to provide more? Victoria's tears spilled over. I'm so sorry, Connor. There's no excuse for that level of selfishness. No, there isn't. They sat in painful silence. Victoria didn't try to justify or minimize her actions. She simply sat with the weight of what she'd done and let Connor process it. I talked to my therapist about this, Connor said finally. Victoria looked surprised. You're in therapy? Started after Sarah died. Emma and I both needed help processing the grief. Connor met her eyes. My therapist asked me an interesting question. If you'd been honest from the beginning, what would I have done? Victoria held her breath. I told her I probably would have been intimidated, maybe assumed we were too different, maybe talked myself out of even trying. Connor paused. She pointed out that you robbed me of the chance to surprise myself, to discover whether I was strong enough to love you anyway. I made assumptions about your character based on my fear. You did. And that's the part that hurts most. Not the money, not even the lying, but the fact that you didn't trust me enough to let me make my own choices. Victoria felt the full weight of her betrayal settling on her shoulders. How do I earn back that trust? I don't know if you can. Connor said honestly. But if we're going to try, I need complete transparency about everything. Your work, your life, your world. I need to understand all of it. What do you want to know? Connor took a breath. Tell me about a typical day in your real life. Victoria spent the next hour describing her world board meetings and acquisition deals, the penthouse and the staff, the responsibilities and pressures of running a major company. Connor listened without judgment, asking practical questions about her work and her daily routine. Do you like it? Connor asked. The business, the responsibility, the wealth, Victoria considered carefully. I like solving problems and building something meaningful. I like being able to help people through my foundation work. But the isolation, the constant pressure, the way money complicates every relationship, that part is exhausting. Foundation work. I started a non-profit that helps working families with emergency expenses, medical bills, car repairs, childcare costs. Victoria felt embarrassed admitting it. I guess I was trying to assuage my guilt about having so much when others have so little. Connor was quiet for a moment. That's good work. It doesn't make up for lying to you. No, it doesn't. But it tells me something about who you are when you're not trying to protect yourself. The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering everything from Victoria's business philosophy to her fears about parenthood, to her loneliness despite material success. Slowly, carefully, Connor began to see the complete picture of who Victoria really was. I need time to process all this, Connor said finally, and I need to see how Emma adjusts to the truth. You're going to tell her age-appropriate version. She deserves to know why you disappeared and why things got complicated. Connor stood to leave. But Victoria, if we're going to try to rebuild something, Emma comes first. Always. If this is too confusing or upsetting for her, we stop. Of course. Connor paused at the door. One more thing. I can't be your project. I won't be the poor guy you save or the charity case you fix. If we do this, we do it as equals who bring different things to the relationship. Victoria felt a surge of respect for his strength. I understand. As Connor walked away, Victoria realized that the hardest work was just beginning. Earning back Connor's trust would require not just honesty, but fundamental changes in how she viewed herself and their relationship. For the first time since her deception was revealed, Victoria felt genuinely hopeful that those changes were possible. 2 weeks passed before Connor called again. Victoria spent those 14 days in a state of anxious limbo, throwing herself into work and volunteer activities while trying not to check her phone every 5 minutes. When Connor finally texted asking if she'd like to meet at the park with Emma, Victoria's hands shook as she typed back her acceptance. She found them by the duck pond where she'd first met Emma properly. The little girl ran to her immediately, but her enthusiasm was tempered with confusion. Victoria, Daddy told me about your important job and your big house. He says that's why you had to go away for a while to figure out grown-up things. Victoria glanced at Connor, grateful for his gentle explanation. That's right, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make mistakes and need time to fix them. But you're back now. We're trying to figure that out, Victoria said honestly. Your daddy and I need to talk more about how to be friends the right way. Emma nodded solemnly. Daddy says you have enough money to help lots of people. That's like being a superhero, right? Connor looked embarrassed. Emma, that's not exactly. It's okay. Victoria interrupted. Emma having money does let me help people sometimes, but it doesn't make me special. The most important things about people can't be bought, like being kind and funny and good at art projects. Exactly like that. They spent the afternoon feeding ducks and talking carefully around the complexity of their situation. Emma chattered about school and her latest drawings, seeming to sense that some topics were off limits, but accepting the modified family dynamic with the resilience of childhood. Victoria, Emma said as they prepared to leave. "Can you still help me with my science project? We're supposed to build a volcano, and Daddy's not very good with that kind of stuff." Connor started to object Victoria's offer to help might be motivated by guilt rather than genuine interest, but Victoria's response stopped him. "I'd love to help, but only if your daddy thinks it's okay. And Emma, I want you to know that whether I help with your volcano or not, whether your daddy and I figure out how to be friends again or not, I care about you very much. That will never change." Emma beamed, and Connor felt something loosen in his chest. Victoria wasn't making promises she couldn't keep or trying to buy affection with expensive gifts. She was offering exactly what a child needed: consistency and honest care. That evening, Connor called after Emma was asleep. "Thank you," he said without preamble, "for what you said about caring about her regardless. She needed to hear that. I meant every word. I know you did. I could tell." Connor paused. "Victoria, I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to be part of our world instead of trying to pull us into yours. What conclusion did you reach that I don't want you to shrink yourself to fit into my life any more than I want to be your charity project? If we're going to try this, we need to figure out how to blend our worlds honestly." Victoria felt a spark of hope. "What would that look like? I don't know yet. But maybe you could show me your real life, your office, your work, the parts of your world that matter to you. Not to impress me, but so I understand what you're actually like when you're not pretending to be broke." Victoria's heart raced. "Would you want to do that?" "Visit my office if you're serious about transparency." "Yes. I need to see all of who you are, not just the parts you think I can handle." They arranged for Victoria to give Connor a tour of Hayes Digital the following week. Victoria spent days preparing, coaching her staff to be natural rather than formal, planning a route that would show her company's culture rather than just its success. Connor arrived on a Thursday afternoon wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, his version of business attire. Victoria met him in the lobby, noting how he studied the modern art and marble surfaces without judgment, just curiosity. "This is impressive," Connor said, as they rode the elevator to the 40th floor. "You built all this?" "My parents started the company, but yes, I built it into what it is now." Victoria felt nervous in a way that board presentations had never made her feel. Connor's opinion mattered more than any investor's. The tour went better than Victoria had hoped. Connor asked thoughtful questions about the business, showed genuine interest in the employee programs Victoria had implemented, and seemed impressed by the company's community involvement initiatives. "You're really good at this," Connor said, as they watched Victoria's marketing team present campaign ideas to a client. "I can see why you're successful. You actually care about doing good work, not just making money." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." In Victoria's office, Connor studied the photos on her desk, her parents, her grandmother, candid shots from various volunteer activities. No photos of boyfriends or fancy parties, Connor observed. "I don't really have those kinds of relationships. Work has been my life for so long, I'd forgotten how to connect with people." Victoria sat across from Connor in the seating area she used for informal meetings, which is why meeting you and Emma felt so important. "You reminded me what I was missing." Connor was quiet for a moment. "Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Of course. If we try this again, what happens to Emma and me when you get tired of playing house, when the novelty of dating a working-class guy wears off?" The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. "Connor, is that really what you think this is?" "A novelty? I don't know what to think. 3 months ago, I thought we were equals building something together. Now I find out you're worth more than I'll make in several lifetimes, and I'm supposed to believe that dating me and my daughter isn't just an interesting experiment. Victoria felt tears threatening. Look around this office. Look at my life. Do you see anything that suggests I'm looking for entertainment or interesting experiments? Connor glanced around the pristine professional space. I see someone who's incredibly successful and probably gets bored easily. What you see is someone who's been lonely for so long she forgot what it felt like to be truly happy until she met you. Victoria leaned forward. Connor, I've dated wealthy men, successful men, men from my world. They bored me. They wanted to talk about stock prices and vacation homes and business deals. You talk about Emma's art projects and help her build volcanoes and read bedtime stories about dragons. You care about things that matter. Connor's expression softened slightly. I'm not slumming it with you, Victoria continued. I'm trying to build a real life with real connections. You and Emma represent everything I thought I'd given up when I chose success over relationships. But our worlds are so different. How do you see this working practically? Victoria had been thinking about that question for weeks. Maybe it starts with honesty about our differences instead of pretending they don't exist. I have resources you don't have. You have experiences and perspectives I lack. Maybe we can learn from each other instead of one of us pretending to be someone we're not. Connor considered this. What would that look like day to day? I don't know yet. But I'd like to find out if you're willing. Connor stood to leave, studying Victoria's face carefully. I'll think about it. And Victoria. Thank you for showing me this. It helps me understand why the deception felt necessary, even if I still think it was wrong. It was wrong. Victoria agreed, but I hope it doesn't have to be permanent. As Connor left her office, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced since her confession genuine possibility. The road ahead would be difficult, requiring both of them to examine their assumptions and fears. But for the first time, it felt like a road they might travel together. 6 months after their reunion in the park, Victoria and Connor had settled into a careful rhythm that honored both their worlds. Victoria attended Emma's school events and helped with homework, while Connor occasionally joined her at business dinners when his presence felt natural rather than forced. It wasn't seamless. There were still moments of awkwardness when their different perspectives clashed, but it was honest. The real test came on a Tuesday evening when Emma's teacher called with concerning news. Mr. Mitchell. This is Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm afraid Emma had an incident at school today. She fell during recess and hit her head. She seems fine, but the school nurse recommends she be seen by a doctor as a precaution. Connor felt his stomach drop. I'll be right there. Actually, sir, I should mention that someone has already picked up Emma. A Victoria Hayes. She's listed as an emergency contact, and she provided proper identification. Connor's first reaction was panic, followed quickly by confusion, and then gratitude. When had Victoria gotten added to Emma's emergency contact list? And how had she responded so quickly? His phone rang immediately. Victoria. Connor. Emma's okay, Victoria said before he could speak. Mrs. Rodriguez called, and I was closer to the school than you were. I've taken her to Denver Health's pediatric emergency department. She's alert and talking normally, but I wanted to have her checked out properly. I'm on my way. Which hospital? Presbyterian St. Joseph. I'll text you the room number. Connor arrived at the hospital to find Emma sitting on an examination table chattering happily to a pediatric doctor, while Victoria held her hand. The sight of them together, Victoria in her business clothes, having clearly left work in the middle of something important, focused entirely on Emma's comfort, made something shift permanently in Connor's chest. Daddy Emma called when she saw him. I bumped my head, but the doctor says my brain is perfectly fine. And Victoria bought me ice cream from the cafeteria, even though it's before dinner. Special circumstances call for special treats, Victoria said, standing to give Connor space with his daughter. The doctor's examination confirmed what Victoria had suspected. Emma had a mild concussion, but was functioning normally. She needed observation for the next 24 hours, but the prognosis was excellent. You responded exactly right, the doctor told Victoria. Getting her evaluated quickly was the smart call. As they walked to Connor's truck, Emma chattering between them about how brave she'd been during the examination, Connor realized something had changed. For the first time since learning about Victoria's deception, he felt completely confident in her commitment to their family. Victoria, Connor said as they buckled Emma into her car seat. "How did you get to the school so fast?" Victoria looked slightly embarrassed. "I might have been in a board meeting when Mrs. Rodriguez called. I might have walked out without explanation. You left a board meeting, Emma needed me. The quarterly projections could wait." Connor felt his last emotional wall crumble completely. "Thank you for being there when I couldn't be. That's what family does," Victoria said simply. 2 weeks later, Connor made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He invited Victoria to move in with them. "Are you sure?" Victoria asked, sitting in his small living room while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. "I don't want to rush anything or make assumptions about where this is heading." "I'm sure," Connor said. "Not because I think we should be living together necessarily, but because Emma needs consistency. She needs to know that the adults in her life aren't going anywhere." Victoria felt tears threatening. "Connor, that's a huge step." "I know. And if you're not ready, I'm ready," Victoria interrupted. "I've been ready. I just didn't want to push." The transition happened gradually. Victoria started staying over more frequently, keeping clothes in Connor's closet and contributing to grocery shopping. She learned the rhythm of their morning routine and the specific way Emma liked her pancakes cut. More importantly, she learned to balance her CEO responsibilities with family priorities. When Emma had a dance recital, Victoria scheduled around it. When Connor needed backup for parent-teacher conferences, she made sure her calendar was clear. "You know what I realized," Connor said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner while Emma practiced piano in the living room. "This isn't about your money anymore. It's not about our different backgrounds or what we can afford to do. What's it about? It's about partnership. You show up for Emma and me, and we show up for you. We solve problems together instead of separately." Victoria smiled, loading dishes into Connor's ancient dishwasher. "I like this version of us better than the one built on lies, even if it's messier and more complicated. Especially because it's messier and complicated. Real relationships aren't perfect." 3 months after Victoria moved in, Emma made an announcement that surprised no one, but touched everyone. "I'm ready for you to marry Victoria now, Daddy," Emma declared over Saturday morning pancakes. "She already lives here and helps with my homework and knows how to braid my hair properly. Plus, she makes you laugh at your own jokes, which is very nice of her, since they're not actually funny." Connor nearly choked on his coffee. "Emma, sweetheart, I've been thinking about it very seriously," Emma continued with 8-year-old gravity. "Victoria loves us. We love Victoria, and she's not going anywhere. Mrs. Chen says when people choose each other every day, that's what marriage means." Victoria and Connor exchanged glances across the table. Emma Victoria said carefully, "Marriage is something adults have to decide together when they're ready." "Are you ready?" Emma asked with devastating directness. Victoria looked at Connor, who was trying not to smile. "That's a very good question." That evening, after Emma was asleep, Connor and Victoria sat on their small porch sharing a beer and talking about Emma's marriage suggestion. "She's not wrong," Connor said eventually. "We have been choosing each other every day. We have Victoria agreed, and I can't imagine wanting to choose anyone else." Connor turned to face her. "Victoria Hayes, will you marry me?" The proposal was Connor-style, direct, honest, delivered in work clothes on a porch that needed painting. Victoria had never heard anything more beautiful. "Yes," she said, pulling him into a kiss that tasted like beer and possibility. Absolutely yes. The wedding took place 8 months later in the community centre, where Victoria had first learned to serve food to families in need. Emma had insisted on the location because, as she explained to anyone who would listen, that's where Victoria learned to be part of our world instead of just visiting it. Victoria wore a simple white dress from a department store, not because she was still pretending to be broke, but because elaborate designer gowns felt wrong for this celebration. Connor wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for Sarah's funeral, and worn to exactly 3 events since. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a purple dress she'd chosen herself, and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked together in City Park. The guest list was small, but meaningful. Mrs. Chen and neighbours from Connor's building, Victoria's assistant, Patricia, and a few close colleagues, families from Emma's school, Connor's crew from Mountain View Construction, volunteers from the rescue mission, and Maya, who cried through the entire ceremony. Friends and family. The officiant began. We're here today to celebrate the marriage of Victoria and Connor, 2 people who found each other in unexpected circumstances and chose to build something real from an imperfect beginning. Victoria had written her vows on Hayes' digital letterhead, then crossed out the corporate heading and written Mrs. Connor Mitchell at the top instead. Connor, she said, her voice steady, despite the tears in her eyes. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone who wants what you have, but someone who sees who you are. You showed me that partnership means showing up for the ordinary moments, not just the special occasions. You and Emma gave me a family I didn't know I needed, and a life I didn't know was possible. Connor's vows were handwritten on notebook paper, the same kind he used for work estimates. Victoria, when we met, I thought I was protecting Emma by keeping our world small and safe. But you showed me that love makes our world bigger, not smaller. You taught Emma that dreams can be as big as her imagination. You taught me that accepting help doesn't make me weak, and offering help doesn't make you better than anyone else. You made us a family. When the officiant pronounced them married, Emma cheered so loudly that everyone in the community centre burst into applause. The reception was potluck style. Mrs. Chen brought dumplings, Connor's co-workers brought beer, Victoria's staff brought fancy appetizers that mixed surprisingly well with the casseroles and homemade cookies. During their first dance to a song playing from someone's portable speaker, Victoria whispered, "This is perfect, even without a fancy wedding planner?" Connor teased, "Especially without a fancy wedding planner. This feels like us." As the evening continued, Victoria watched their unlikely wedding party and marveled at how naturally their different worlds had blended. Emma was teaching Victoria's CFO how to fold napkins into flowers. Mrs. Chen was discussing investment strategies with Connor's foreman, Joe. Maya was showing photos of the reception to family members over video chat. "No regrets?" Connor asked as they slow danced, while Emma and other children ran circles around them. Only one, Victoria said, "I regret that it took me so long to trust you with the truth. We could have been building this life together months sooner, but maybe we needed the hard parts to appreciate what we have now." Victoria considered this. "Maybe you're right. I had to learn how to be vulnerable before I could be a real partner, and I had to learn how to accept help before I could be an equal partner." They danced until Emma fell asleep in Mrs. Chen's lap, exhausted from the excitement. As Connor carried his daughter to the car, she stirred long enough to mumble, "Best wedding ever, Daddy. Victoria's really our family now, right?" "Yes, sweetheart, she's really our family now." The next morning, Victoria woke up in Connor's bed. Their bed now, to the sound of Emma practicing piano in the living room. Connor was already up making coffee and pancakes for their first breakfast as an officially married family. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell," Connor said, kissing her forehead. "I like the sound of that." As they sat around the kitchen table, Emma announced her next project. "I'm going to paint a new family portrait." The old one wasn't right because Victoria looked like she might disappear. "But now she can't disappear because you're married." Victoria laughed, pulling Emma into her lap. "That's right. I can't disappear now. I'm stuck with you two forever." "Promise?" Emma asked seriously. "I promise," Victoria said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Forever and always. 2 years later, Connor stood in the lobby of Hayes Digital Solutions, wearing his best suit and watching Victoria address the company's annual shareholders meeting. Emma sat beside him in a red dress that matched Victoria's, proudly watching her stepmother present the company's new affordable housing initiative. The little girl whispered, "Victoria's really good at her job, isn't she?" "Daddy." Connor squeezed her hand, marveling at how their two worlds had become one. "She's good at everything she cares about, and she cares about us most of all." Mrs. Chen had been right that day in the hospital when she'd told them that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other through the imperfect moments. Victoria had learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and Connor had discovered that accepting help didn't diminish his strength. Their marriage wasn't built on lies or financial disparity, but on the daily choice to support each other's dreams while building something beautiful together. As Victoria finished her presentation and walked toward them, Connor thought about that first night in the coffee shop when she'd lied about everything except how she felt about him. Now, watching Emma run into Victoria's arms while investors applauded in the background, he knew that sometimes the most unlikely love stories created the strongest foundations. Love, it turned out, wasn't about having everything in common. It was about building something beautiful from honest differences one day at a time. If you believe love is worth fighting for through every challenge and difference, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us. Hope always finds a way back. Sometimes the most broken beginnings create the strongest foundations, and sometimes the person who changes everything walks into your life exactly when you need them most. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs to remember that second chances are real, and drop a comment telling us about a time when honesty changed everything in your life. Remember, the best love stories aren't about perfection. They're about two imperfect people choosing each other every single day.